Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Borough, the FAU podcast for and by fans, brought to you by FAUOwlsNest.com. My name is Dan. I'm joined here with a couple guys. Jack, say hello, Jack.
What's up, everyone? How's it going?
And not a newcomer to the show. He's been on once before, and he's definitely been on the forum for a while. You guys know him as OC40. Say hello, Shane.
What's going on, guys? Hello, guest.
Shane's going to be on with us. Mo's on vacation for the week, and Shane will probably be on a couple times and pretty often throughout the year. So, so we'll just kind of dig into it. There's certainly a lot that happened in the past couple days, past couple weeks, really. The first thing we're kind of going to dig into is some roster. Really incoming roster. There's really one big name that's leaving. QB Stephen Frank from Oswego High School in Illinois is headed back to Illinois. He was part of the Super 16 class last year, and he was a redshirt. He would have been a redshirt freshman this year, and with the amount of QB talent that's on the team right now and incoming talent. They probably thought it was best that he leaves. So after that, so that's kind of the one outgoing. But recently, in the past week, John Franklin III, a QB/wide receiver from Auburn, just stated that he was going to come down to Boca. He'll probably play wide receiver. And then recently, 2 days ago, Chris Robinson, a former quarterback from University of Oregon, Oklahoma University. I don't know why I said Oregon. I decided he was going to transfer here. So those are kind of some big names, and we've got a lot of other big names and a lot of big transfers that are coming in this fall. So you guys can kind of talk a little bit about it. But what do you think? What do you think of the kind of big name transfers? We got some Florida State. Obviously, we know all about the Last Chance U guys, but we got a defensive lineman from Pitt, another linebacker from Florida State. What do you guys think about the amount of kind of Power 5 talent that's now on the team?
I think our staff is, and Lane's pointed out to this numerous times. He's just out there kind of looking for free agents, and a lot of coaching staffs aren't in that mindset right now. Lane's trying to add talent to this roster that desperately needed. Has a lot of good players, but we saw at the end of last year just how bad the depth was. A lot of these players have some connections. The Tellini, the player from Pitt, there's a connection on our coaching staff, their player personnel. So when they're hearing about these guys coming on the market, FAU's the one stepping up saying, we'll take you. And then I think kind of words getting out there where players know that if they mess up, they can kind of come here. Granted, a lot of these kids haven't done anything awfully bad, but they know the doors are open here. Charles Robinson, the kid who was originally recruited by Baylor early on, probably had a connection to Kendall Briles. And John Franklin the third had a connection with probably Clint Trickett, and he's originally from South Plantation High School, and he originally said he graduated, and there was an article 2 weeks ago where he said he wasn't transferring, and I'm sure FAU or someone, they got connected, and he said, why not come play closer to home? He's a really explosive, fast kid who got buried a little bit on the depth chart at receiver at Auburn. But he's a kid who can come here and help immediately in the return game and that receiver.
It's something that I love about all this is all the extra news it's bringing to the program. You've seen it on the message boards. You've seen it on Reddit. You saw it on ESPN and Twitter. All they're talking about is FAU and these players coming here. Franklin, things didn't work out for him at Florida State. Auburn, he graduated, so he gets to play right away. He said he wanted to play quarterback and be a Heisman. Well, it's not going to happen. You're not going to be a Heisman, not going to be a quarterback. We'll take you as a receiver, and you'll play right away. And like Shane said, you have that connection. And Shane actually he mentioned this before we went on. You have a choice between these G5 programs. Are you going to go to Buffalo or are you going to go to Boca Raton? Take your pick. You're gonna play in the MAC. You're gonna play for Lane Kiffin with explosive offenses of Conference USA. And if you're looking for a second chance, that's kind of a no-brainer right there.
And one thing that's kind of been out there is everyone's this last chance you, second chance you thing. Most of the kids on our roster have had no real issues. Even the kids they've brought in. I mean, Charles Robinson, public intoxication. Okay, he was a college kid the day after a spring game. The details weren't disclosed why Tellini was kicked off the roster, but there was no reports of him being arrested or anything like that. So, we're not bringing in these really bad kids. They're kids who've messed up, and big programs can afford to cut these kids, and FAU can take them.
Yeah, I think Tellini he's broke team rules or something like that, and so you're right. There was nothing. I mean, other than DeAndre Johnson, who punched a woman in the face, but that's another discussion. But you're right. We're not bringing somebody who was on drug charges or had kind of serious allegations against him. So there is somebody Sanzi on the forum did a chart, and there's about 11 or 12 people that are coming from these Power 5 programs that are now going to be on the team. I mean, that's that influx of talent so quickly. We've never seen that before. So I am curious to see how that's going to impact the team right away.
And for a team that lost so many games by less than 7 points in the last 3 years, I mean, what will 11 players do, especially, this talent, even if half of those guys end up working out to be real contributors? I mean, I'm not saying all 11 is going to work out because it just won't happen that way. But if half of those guys end up being impactful players to go along with a lot of the young talent we have, and we'll get into it later, some, especially on the defense side of the ball, that's really starting to develop into some really good football players, it's going to make a lot of difference.
God, I mean, even if we get half of those guys just to contribute towards depth, that will just help so much when it comes to fixing that issue in the third and fourth quarter of losing leads, having missed opportunities late in the game to come back from those 7-point deficits or anything like that. If half of those guys just add depth, then it helps. And so why should we say no to that at this point? We've been in the past 3 years. Why should we say no?
And there's just little things that people don't think about. The scout team that your starters go against every week.
Yep. A team like Navy, we're going to need the best scout players we can get.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're using a couple of their top. I know a lot of schools in the past, and you guys are getting a little bit more Navy prep, have used, they'll use on their scout team, they'll use like a team of linebackers that play offensive line. Because Navy uses smaller, faster offensive linemen. They'll put like a receiver at quarterback, and they'll kind of run through the scout like that. But when you have talented players in that position doing that, or emulating, when you have a Willie Wright emulate Richie James in practice all week, stuff like that helps. Or James Franklin emulating, right? That stuff is the difference between 3-9 and 10-3. I say 10-3 because I don't think we're that far from a team like Old Dominion, who's not much more talented than we are, and they won 10 games last year somehow. So, I mean, and plus I think our coaching staff is a lot better as well. I've made that point many times.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the games we lost by 7 points just with the new coaching staff, I mean, just you can take the same players and a different coaching staff, and we're 6-6, So it'll be. I am interested to see how they're gonna gel. One person, a couple people on the board made mention of there's a lot of the transfer from Florida State or from whatever community college he came from, Kane Daub. He's a linebacker, probably. Shane's been to a couple practices, and he said he's working at defensive end. But they're coming on. They're coming on so late. How are they gonna integrate? Which is nice that we don't have conference play right in the beginning of the year. We'll have basically 3 tune-up games with Navy, Wisconsin, and Bethune to kind of hopefully get more cohesive and figure things out.
I don't want to look at Navy as entirely as a tune-up game. I think that's FAU's biggest commercial all year. ESPNU Friday night, if you look at the other 2 games that are on that night, Wisconsin plays Utah State and Rutgers plays Washington, or unless you're fans of those teams, no one's tuning in. The rest of the college football world who is craving for college football is tuning in to watch Lane Kiffin that night to root against him, or FAU needs to perform in that game.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking that earlier. Actually, what made me think of that is Tony Kornheiser in Pardon the Interruption saying he was all in on Owl Nation, and he did that. And it's like there's no more who's FAU, and that's obviously thanks to Lane Kiffin. But we're at a point again where it would be detrimental to fall on our face. Anything below 6 wins is going to be pretty considered a pretty big failure.
And not even so much that, even if this team comes on strong late, is that national attention going to be there to be, oh, you know what, this team, they looked really good against Marshall. They're playing really good down the stretch. Especially if we start slow and kind of finish strong, a lot of that national attention will go away by then. And not many people are going to be rechecking back in with FAU to see, how we play against FIU nationally. Locally and within the conference, yes, but eyeballs will be on FAU that Friday night.
First impressions matter. That's the thing. And if you're a random college football fan in Tennessee or Southern California or Alabama, you're not going to be checking in on how FAU is doing in October. You're going to watch that first game when it doesn't inconvenience you, and hope for a dumpster fire and then see what happens. And then if you see FAU hanging there with Navy, then we'll say, maybe Lane's got something going on. Maybe he's not too bad after all. If you see what FAU did against Western Kentucky when the stadium opened, and against Miami on national television in Boca, and see that kind of a dud, then again, you're not going to care. You're going to think this is the same old FAU.
Yeah.
And Navy's a tough opponent to do that against. Really tough opponent.
Definitely. It might be the toughest group of 5 opponent. You can throw in USF or Houston in there, Boise, but just the style of football that Navy plays, it's so hard to prepare for.
Yeah, really good football teams can look really silly against a triple option. It's just one of those things. You either figure out how to stop it or you don't. And I know they said they were prepping starting today for it, which I think is helpful. And we have a new staff, so Navy doesn't really have a way to see how we played the triple option in the past, which they can do against their conference opponents. So it'd just be really interesting. And as we kind of go through the positions in this podcast, us having to prepare for Navy kind of affects some other things and trying to figure out the depth at a lot of position in our rotation and, kind of throughout the season.
One thing, Shane mentioned this again before we were on the air is if like you said, good football teams can look silly, but if you can figure out the triple option, you can really, you can make your less talented team really have a hold. And I think, or really see much better than they are. And this, we might really see the benefit of having Monty Kiffin on as a defensive advisor or whatever he is, seeing that kind of older school type of football.
If you look at our staff, there's actually experience against triple option. Our D-line coach coached at USF last year. Yep. And he saw the triple option. Great. They won that game. They got up huge on Navy, and Navy came all the way back and scored like 43 points in that game. USS's run defense was shaky the whole year. They outscored everyone last year. So it's kind of tough to tell. So he has experience. I know Batoon and Chris Kiffin saw the triple option a couple times at Ole Miss, once through Georgia Southern, and once when they first got there, they played Georgia Tech in a bowl game. So it's nothing that they've never prepared for.
No.
And I think by them saying that they're going to prepare for it 2 weeks early, or is showing that they're taking the game seriously. I know, one assistant I talked to at one of the events this year said if you have to go to Navy in the middle of the season, so you're on the road and you have a travel day, it's one extra day to prepare. You don't spend extra time on it. You just kind of cross your fingers and go in. Houston got beat that way by Navy last year. I mean, Houston's a great defense that shut down Lamar Jackson. And Navy scored 45 points on them. So, and they have maybe one of the best D tackles in the country. So, but, it was middle of the season. I think Houston was coming off like a big win, and they travel. You only get 3 days to prepare, and then you go into Indianapolis, and you get like run out of there. So it's tough. But FAU's saw this a few years ago. We played a true freshman, Keenan Reynolds, and we almost won that game. I think
we lost by 10. I want to say. I was about to mention that.
No, I think it was 7 because I remember driving at the end, and Pelini didn't call a timeout when he thought he should, or to drop a play on a 4th and 10. And but they didn't run. They moved the ball well on us, but they didn't go crazy. I think that final score of that game was like 24-17 or something. Yeah. We forced some fumbles, which is kind of a big thing with triple option. They're ultimately going to move the ball. They're going to get yards. The key is like forcing that fumble or kind of ending their drives is not letting them get the big plays, but forcing. I think we had forced a few fumbles against Auburn's probably the best quarterback in that school's history. So, and they came in and they ran a completely different defense, Pelini did, and I think we did a pretty good job. That team, I think, is way less talented than the one now.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier about how if you're able to stop the triple option offense, or like you said, create those turnovers, how that can make bad teams look better. And right when you guys said that, that's the first thing I thought of. That was what, 2013? 12?
Yeah, I was playing his first year.
Yep.
And it's so that was what the Miami and then the ECU year then, right?
Yep. No, Graham Wilbur was the starting quarterback.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, that's right. It was still Wilbur. Yeah, it was still Graham. So that's those years just get stuck because it's just so bad. It was just so rough.
They almost won a game in Annapolis. So I mean.
Yeah. So there you go. Sometimes bad teams can look good because
it's so hard to predict how anyone will look against that. I mean, Navy, even though Notre Dame's defense was atrocious last year, Navy scored on every single drive. They can punt once to get Notre Dame last year in a neutral site game. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, the best offenses in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, they scored on every single drive, and the only reason they didn't score a million points in that game because the drives were 15, 16 plays, and they were just slowly march, and Notre Dame had no answers. And Notre Dame sees Navy every year.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just switch it up on Navy and do a little triple option because Force has like a mix, and they couldn't beat Army for the first time in God knows how long. Why don't we just mix it up a bit?
Georgia Southern beat Florida at Florida with a triple option without
there you go.
Without throwing a pass.
And next year took Georgia into overtime.
Yeah.
Triple option. So I mean, it's crazy.
So we'll dig. If we'll try to record a show next week where we'll talk. We'll definitely, before the Navy game, we'll dig a little bit deeper into that, and by then we should have a depth chart, and this is probably a week and a half, 2 weeks away. So we'll definitely dig more into Navy. So we're going to move on to the poll that we put up last time, and thank you to everybody that participated. The question was, which position is FAU's biggest concern, or do you think FAU's biggest concern is? And we'll kind of go through each answer, and it's a good way to kind of go through the roster a little bit as well. Most people's concern was on the defensive line. Had kind of the largest percentage, and Shane's been to practices, so he can speak more to this. But I don't know. I mean, I guess when you think back of the past 4 years, FAU's defensive line has been. Well, I guess they've had multiple NFL players on that line each year, with the exception of last year. But you had a third-round draft pick there in Trey Hendrickson. So I don't know, Shane. I mean, you've been to more practices, and there hasn't been one kind of steady name that sticks out. Sometimes it's Hunter Schneider, then it's Nick Internicola. What do you think? What have you seen more in the defensive line?
I think they're a lot deeper than they were last year. A lot deeper. I think the biggest thing now is they kind of have to figure out a rotation. Who's going to be a good, like I said, a good D-line has a rotation of 10 guys who consistently play in and out, rundowns, guys who are just there to rush the passer. I think defensive end could end up being a strong position. I know the coaches, I know a lot of people talk great about Hunter Snyder, and a lot of people don't know, and it's been written about a couple of times that he played kind of hurt all last year, and we didn't see the same Hunter Snyder we saw his freshman year, the kid making plays at Florida, and he's back. I mean, he's huge. I mean, Tim Bonner, the East Mississippi kid, is great, lengthy kid, has really good bend. Could be a really good pass rusher. Intercola's been here. Coaches say great things about Hayden Nagel. Like, he's just a solid, he's smart. He's really good at stopping the run. William Davis, the kid from Fort Pierce Central, had to play a lot last year. And he's kind of coming along. And then Stephen Leggett is a kid who had to play as a true freshman. And everyone, I don't know if everyone remembers him coming out of high school. He only played out of Glade Central. He only played high school football like his senior year, and then had to play as a true freshman. So he's one of my guys to look out for, who can take a huge step. He was a raw player coming out. But Ernest Banger has gotten, written about as, making some plays, the other JUCO defensive end. So I've said a lot of names, and even Ray Ellis is coming back from injury, who before he got hurt last year, people were saying he was turning into the next Trayvon Coley, and he got hurt. So there's a lot of names. I think right now they're still just in the process of figuring out who exactly is going to be in the rotation. There's a lot of guys who are, having strong camps and coming along, and it's like one of those things. Do they kind of have enough time to get it together, get a real rotation, everyone kind of a playbook? I mean, this D-line could be a really strong D-line later in the season. It's just how fast they develop it. I think we have a great D-line coach, and D-line is Chris Kiffin's specialty. That's what he coached at Ole Miss. So, you have a lot of talented football players there, just kind of figuring them out and piecing them all in is kind of like the question right now. And as I think Kiffin said the other day, that's probably that was their biggest worry in the spring, and maybe the most improved position now due to a lot of guys coming back. But just figuring that out and getting them into the flow of the game as a rotation, I hope it doesn't take 3 or 4 games. We all hope they figure that out at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe 4 games into the year.
Going off to what you were saying, Shane, there is like no one guy that we're all counting on. There's no Trey Hendrickson. It appears to be this year. For me, I would rather I think we'd be better off being deep and not knowing a rotation as of right now than being thin and having an idea of a rotation. We kind of saw that a little bit last year where we had an idea of a rotation. We have these solid guys that have experience and God-given talent like Trey. And then we see injuries start to take some of these guys down. And then we're throwing out some question marks out there. And then you can see what that can do to a defense like at Middle Tennessee in the last game of the year. So, I mean, as of now, I don't see an issue with that. But you're right. We should get it situated by Bethune-Cookman, and after Bethune-Cookman by Ball State.
Well, these things can be weird. I don't want to put a game on it. Sometimes it just takes that one game where it all clicks. I mean, they can go out there, and Middle Tennessee is having some O-line issues, and they can go out there and we can win that game and sack Brent Stockstill 10 times in that game. And that could be the game it all kind of comes together. You know, I mean, would that be great? But I think this has the potential to be the deepest FAU line in a long time. There's a lot of new guys who weren't here in the spring and who were hurt and they're coming back. There's a lot of talented guys, and they just, you know, kind of a guy that was written about today was, and someone told me last year that he was like one of the faster DNs they ever saw. Lane talked about him today. McCarthy kid, the kid from Apopka. Like, you know, he's a smaller, another DN. I mean, there's just how many names have we rattled off? How many?
Yeah.
Last year, I mean, there was probably 4 guys who you could trust to be suitable on the line, and once it got past those few guys, you end up with the Middle Tennessee game where they're just snapping the ball to a guy, pushing guys back 5 yards, and people are just taking off running.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we might not be as D-line might not be that big of a concern. Next, and that maybe it was lack of options. We should put more options there next time. The next most popular was offensive line, and I mean last year. Hold on. Last year, the offensive line, especially the year, was
You're still echoing.
pretty solid. I mean, I don't think we're going to have to worry too much. I mean, we're going to get Reggie Bain back this year. He missed all of his freshman All-American. I'm pretty sure, and then the rest, you know, Roman Fernandez, the rest of the line, pretty experienced. As a lot of guys got action last year.
Yeah, there's definitely, we created some depth last year, and I think with the addition of the transfer from San Diego State, Will, I'm not going to make an attempt at this last name, Will T, we'll call him, and there's a lot of experience up there. It's a good starting 5. Brandon Walton at right tackle, who's played numerous positions. Then there's a couple guys who had to play a lot last year who, you know, are going to be out, and you're not going to – O-linemen are going to get hurt. That's just the nature of the game. You know, usually your first 8 starting linemen all end up having to play. I think they want to build a little bit more depth on the kind of center guard position. And there's some guys who are coming back late from injury. I know Tarek Thomas has just started to get practice again. He was a promising recruit who got hurt last year. So, you know, maybe he'll need a few weeks of practice. He can work his way kind of into the O-line rotation and build more depth that way. Shears is another guy who got hurt. It was in the spring and is kind of working his way back. You know, it's like, with a lot of these, it's almost like, man, if you just had another month at camp, this could be a team with a lot of depth. And I think, you know, they're establishing starters right now, a lot of positions, but kind of building the depth, bringing it back from injury, guys come back from injuries, and obviously all the transfers we talked about, they're kind of building it behind, and maybe as soon as you get those there, season starts in a couple weeks. So, you know, knock on wood, if we can stay healthy first couple weeks, I think, you know, there'll be some quality depth throughout the season.
I feel like the staying healthy issue is the only issue I really have with the O line. It's kind of like the opposite, the defensive line, where we kind of know the 5 or 6 guys are going to be on the line. We can maybe switch someone out. We're not too deep right now, but I'm still pretty confident in the guys that we have now because of the experience that they had in the past, because they had to be thrusted out into playing immediately. I'm really big on Brandon Walton, player from Pinellas County, and Roman Fernandez. I mean, those guys, I can hype them up as much as I want.
Well, I mean, Antonio Woods and Roman Fernandez have, I mean, now I think they walked on together. I mean, they played together for 8 years. They both Summer Ridge products. So
crazy, man.
It's almost like a Pouncey brother situation, Florida is too. And Antonio Woods is obviously went to the media days for Conference USA. He's a great kid, just been a starter, one of those typical offensive linemen you always see on TV, 4-year starter, super high GPA. They plays center. Roman Fernandez, like, people forget that he missed a year. He had kind of an illness and missed a year and came back and worked in. And Bain is back, and for everything I hear, he's kind of just back to normal. So
I think time will tell, but like the offensive line hasn't been written much about. It hasn't been an issue, and perhaps they haven't dominated, but they haven't been an issue to where we've got major holes in the offensive line. So
yeah, and also the Baylor offense, Kendall Bryant's offense, gets the ball quick out of their quarterback's hands. They know what it's designed to do. We don't know exactly how physical the practices are, how much hard running they're doing with Powell and motor in practice to kind of test the run blocking. I'm sure they're not getting dozens of carries in practice. Obviously full contact where kind of test maybe that run blocking, but I think it's one of our stronger positions.
Yeah, I agree. So to kind of wrap things up there, and the last option there was wide receiver. And I don't think we're going to have, with the amount of depth, we recently got Cameron Solomon back, which is huge. Then the influx of John Franklin III, a wide receiver from Auburn, who I haven't seen much of him, but the couple of the clips that I saw reminds me of more of Henry Bussey, not super big but super fast. There was somebody mentioned that he had a case of the drops. He couldn't hold on to the ball very much, but that type of SEC speed in Conference USA, just similar to what we did with Lucky, just give him the ball and then get out of the way type thing. So I don't think wide receiver is going to be initially. I mean, when this poll went up, we had lost Caleb Woods and Cameron Solomon, and it was maybe, I don't think everybody really knew who Pico Harrison was and who was behind him, and Henry Bussey hadn't really panned out. But at this point, I'm not super concerned about wide receiver.
No, there's a lot of guys here who can play. I think kind of like the D line, they're just kind of figuring out and get in there. McNeil he just looks different than a lot of players who've been through FAU. I mean, he looks like a kid who played football at Texas. There's just a noticeable difference there. Pico has made plays this fall. I think Henry Bussey is underutilized. Solomon had a great spring. Coaches raved about him, so I think there's enough there. I know. Hopefully we could see it. I know everyone, kind of the big talk out there is what's going on at quarterback. I think the quarterback's just kind of the final piece now, kind of built around everything we talk about. Everyone knows how good the running backs are. We're sitting here saying that we think the receivers are good, the O-line's solid. So I think we need someone just to kind of, not so much manage the game, but just run Kendall Briles' offense and, let kind of some of the playmakers that we normally don't see in Conference USA make plays. And, I think that they'll do fine offensively with that.
I think if we were to do this poll again right now, I think we'd probably switch out quarterback or maybe linebacker with receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, McNeil, like Shane was saying, just on a whole nother level. McGriff, he's been a pleasant surprise. I wasn't too high on him coming into camp. We'd even mentioned Nate Terry, and now Solomon coming back. Cameron Solomon, it completely changes things, I think. And I was one of the biggest voices when it came to saying that I have no confidence in this receiving core. And now I do a complete 180 with the depth that we have. I feel pretty good.
And the freshmen have looked good. I mean, people have written about how good Willie Wright looks. I mean, what I saw, I think Jordan Merrill, and I loved him coming out. He's one of those kids who kind of didn't touch the ball a lot because he was at St. Thomas. They had to work him in with the other, all the kids around him. But whenever he did touch the ball there, he made plays. And when I see him in action, I think he's going to be a really good football player. I don't know how much impact he'll make his freshman year, but he was a great get for FAU.
Just look at all these names we're naming off, man. We have the depth.
We mentioned Denzel Houston, who came out of Mainland, who FAU's recruited really well out of Mainland.
Bobby Mitchell is another one.
Yeah.
Well, who I think he initially came as again kind of the Charlie Partridge thing where we didn't know what we were going to do with you, where he was
I believe
a big safety or a big defensive
Bobby
back.
Mitchell was a Pelini commit, but Bobby Mitchell's been here for he's a redshirt
junior.
Yeah. So he's been here for, I think he's Pelini a kid out of St. Augustine. And he was a 3-star recruit, and I guess never just caught on with some of the coaches, but they like him and they're using him a lot here. I mean, he has good speed, lengthy guy. I think, that's a position we have a lot of playmakers. I mean, just some of them have to just emerge consistently. And I think a lot of coaches are saying that in camp. You have a lot of talented football players. You're looking just for the few. And I know at Baylor, though, one thing to look for is Baylor would run 4 or 5 receivers off and put 4 or 5 other receivers in the game sometimes, kind of with that high-speed offense constantly. So look for FAU to do that sometimes. So a lot of these guys are going to play if you're on the roster.
We definitely have the depth for it, yeah. It's whether or not we have a quarterback that can give it to him.
Yeah, I think we'll hopefully by next week we'll have a clearer picture of the quarterback.
I like I said before, I think we'll know who the quarterback is when we get the ball versus Navy.
Yeah.
And I ultimately think they're going to end up playing 2 quarterbacks. That game.
I mean, Daniel Parr wasn't until last week was kind of an afterthought, and then I think I read DeAndre Johnson got injured, and Parr came in and started doing well. So another wrinkle into the.
I mean, you got to just find someone to just get the ball to all these athletes we have. I posted this in the Nest, and and credit to Matthew DeFranks, who put out the stats of that's the scrimmage, which and I think there was like 77 passes and 57 runs, and then as I pointed out, some of those runs were just plays where the quarterback took it and took off. So it was really like 80 pass plays called to 50 runs. I mean, I think most FAU fans know, and just going by Baylor's history, Baylor, if you look at all their years, they were scoring 40 points a game. They were running the ball anywhere from 61 to 65% of the time. College football stats. So they were running the ball. And I don't think there's going to be a point in the year unless we're just really far down and we're trying to get big chunks yard where we're with our running back situation where we're going to throw 80 times for 50 run plays over a 2-game period. I think it'll be the opposite. And then as I pointed out, you run the ball and you have Motor and Buddy hopefully gashing for 5-6 yards of play. Passing lanes will open up and it'll make it easier for our quarterbacks.
Absolutely. That's the game plan. That's where we're gonna have to do. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that in the next episode, but it'll definitely be switched. I agree. We'll definitely be running it a lot more than passing, and that's why we're in practice right now. That's why we're in camp. So the guys who need to practice, like the quarterbacks and the receivers, can work on their timing until the season begins.
I don't think the coaches. Do the coaches need to go out and hand the ball to Motor Singletary 25 times in a scrimmage to know that he's an amazing player? I mean, Buddy Howe at this point, you know. I mean, I think Buddy just ran the ball a few times, and he had one run from like the 10-yard line where I thought he was wrapped up like 4 or 5 times, and he just kept going and bouncing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, the person I was with is like, all right, get him out of here, just chill out the rest of the scrimmage. You know, it's and so I think, you know, there's a lot of intentional just working on the passing game. You know, and at least I think a lot of that's by design, you know, doing what they need to get all these receivers and quarterbacks on the same page and just get as many passing reps because they're splitting reps between the 3 quarterbacks, which I think is another thing. You know, it's hard when you're splitting these reps. You'll work with the first team, then work with the second team, and, you know, it could be 30, and then, you know, the other quarterbacks get a chance, and it could be 30, 40 minutes before you get back out there and work with the first team again. So I think it's hard a lot of times just in the scrimmages. It could be, you know, a bit more fast-paced in practices where maybe a quarterback comes out in a jitter, first couple drives aren't that good, and then they get in the flow of the game. And that's kind of hard in a scrimmage when you're splitting first-team reps. You know, you're not getting in the flow of things. So kind of just take, you know, I know some of the other sites are so reactionary to what they see in fall scrimmage, but, you know, just don't react to it. Be crazy, but, you know, I do want to point out the positive, and Jack and I talked about this. I want FAU fans to be really excited about the defensive backs this year. It's going to be the most improved position. I'll say this: they'll be the best defensive backfield in Conference USA by far. There's 10 guys who can play. A lot of the guys have just, you know, we've recruited Shelton Lewis, Chris Cooley, who is just like one of my favorite players. I just see these kids always around the ball. They've made it really tough on these quarterbacks. Herb Miller's look great in the slot. I mean, he's Jalen Young. I mean, there's competition. The freshman Zion Gilbert from Alabama looks like he can step in and play right away. James Pierre, the transfer, who's one-time North Carolina commit. Like, this is a deep defensive backfield.
In Conference USA, if you're going to be the real contender, that is an absolute must. Absolute must. You're going to have to be deep. You're going to have to be super athletic, or you're just not going to be even sniffing a conference championship game come December.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the credit to what they're talking about, the quarterback turnover the ball. I mean, a lot of the credit is just our defensive backs are just, I mean, every ball I see is contested. You know, receivers have to make great catches. They have to be great throws. Our DBs are there. I think that's just a product of them growing up and, you know, becoming really good football players like we thought they were, and we saw flashes of that in 2015. It kind of stinks that the first 2 games we probably won't be able to see much of that, you know, playing Navy and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get to see plenty of it the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's probably about wraps it up. One minor note on the Schmidt Athletic Complex, I saw they put up 3 gates where it's gonna be next to the stadium. So progress, perhaps, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll see some construction equipment and stuff start showing up there. But yeah, I think that about does it. That about does it for this week. As I said, we'll dig into Navy as it gets to get into Navy week. If we get a chance, we'll record another show next week. And thanks for Shane for being on. And I'm sure we'll definitely see you later on in the year. And as always, thanks for Jack for being here. And for everybody else in Owl Nation, I'm Dan, and go Owls.